The crisis around Iran is no longer being framed as a conflict contained within the Middle East. It is increasingly being described by the world's major powers as a confrontation with the potential to redraw security calculations across a far wider map from the Strait of Hormuz to the Caspian Sea and beyond. Moscow, watching events closely, has now delivered one of its clearest warnings yet. Any expansion of the conflict into the Caspian would be regarded as a serious and deeply destabilizing step. That warning came from Kremlin Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov after reports and official Israeli claims suggested that Iranian naval assets in the Caspian Sea had been targeted. The development, if sustained, would mark a significant geographic widening of hostilities into waters long viewed as strategically sensitive, particularly for Russia and Iran, which both border the inland sea. Reuters reported this week that Israel said it had struck Iranian naval targets in the Caspian for the first time, while Moscow responded with visible alarm. For Russia, the issue is bigger than naval tactics or battlefield signaling. The Caspian Sea sits at the intersection of energy infrastructure, shipping routes, military posture, and regional influence. It is one of the few zones where Russia's security interests and Iran's geographic depth overlap in a particularly direct way. Any military action there risks turning a regional war into a broader strategic contest with implications for energy markets, diplomacy, and great power relations. Setting out the Kremlin's public line, Peskov made Moscow's position unmistakably clear. Russia would view it extremely negatively. The remark was brief, but it carried the full weight of a government trying to prevent another front from opening in a war already sending shockwaves through international politics. Reuters and TASS both reported the comment on March 24 as Moscow signaled that it does not want the Middle East conflict spilling into a zone so close to core Russian interests. The Kremlin's message, though stern, was paired with another theme Russia has repeated with increasing urgency: diplomacy must replace escalation. Peskov has described the broader regional picture as dangerously tense, and Moscow's public statements have leaned heavily toward restraint, de-escalation, and renewed political dialogue. In that sense, Russia is trying to position itself not as a passive observer, but as a power warning that the conflict is approaching thresholds that may become difficult to reverse. In public comments, the Kremlin argued that the moment for a diplomatic track should have come much sooner. Speaking in language that reflected a growing sense of urgency, Peskov said the crisis should have moved into a political settlement mode as early as yesterday, emphasizing that only diplomacy could reduce what he described as a catastrophically tense situation. That phrasing captured the Russian view that the region is already much too close to a wider disaster. Another major Russian concern centers on the safety of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, especially the Bushehr nuclear power plant on the Persian Gulf Coast. In the current climate, Bushehr has emerged as one of the most sensitive sites in the entire confrontation. Russia helped build the plant and remains closely linked to it through its state nuclear corporation, Rosatom. Because of that involvement, any threat to the facility is treated in Moscow not only as a regional danger, but as a matter with direct Russian stakes. When asked about the possibility of attacks on nuclear-related targets, the Russian side stressed the exceptional sensitivity of the matter. Peskov pointed to Bushehr as a nuclear facility under international oversight and referenced Russia's ongoing contact with the International Atomic Energy Agency. He also invoked repeated warnings from Rosatom chief Alexei Likachev, who has recently spoken in stark terms about the dangers posed by military action near the site. Reuters reported that Likachev called for a kind of safety island around Bushehr after a projectile landed near the plant earlier this month, warning that serious damage could trigger a regional catastrophe. The language used by the Kremlin on this issue is notably sharper than routine diplomatic caution. In one of the central warnings carried in the remarks, Peskov said, "We consider the launching of strikes against nuclear facilities potentially extremely dangerous and fraught with possibly even irreparable consequences." That statement goes to the heart of Russia's present case. Once nuclear sites become active military targets, the consequences are no longer purely military. They become environmental, humanitarian, and potentially transnational. The IAEA's own recent statements help explain why those warnings are being taken so seriously. The agency has said Bushehr remains under safeguards and has reported no indication of abnormal radiation levels, even as it monitors the broader regional fallout from the war. It has also described the facility as one of the installations requiring close international attention amid the fighting. In other words, while the worst-case scenario has not materialized, the concern is not hypothetical. The system is under stress and the margin for error is small. At the same time, the diplomatic picture remains deeply confused. President Donald Trump said the United States had held new talks with Iran and suggested major points of agreement had already been reached. He portrayed those discussions as serious and potentially promising, even indicating that planned attacks on major Iranian energy and electricity targets have been temporarily postponed to leave room for a broader understanding. The White House identifies Trump as the current president, and multiple reports have reflected his claim that progress may be possible. Yet that optimistic version of events has not been universally accepted, and some parts of it have been openly denied. Reuters reported sharp Iranian pushback to claims of active talks, underscoring how difficult it is to separate signaling, negotiation, pressure tactics, and public messaging in real time. Moscow, too, has made clear that it sees the landscape as muddled and filled with contradictions rather than clarity. Peskov reflected that uncertainty in another key remark, saying there have been many different statements today, including some contradictory ones. We continue to monitor the situation closely and hope that it will soon return to a peaceful course. The line captured the Kremlin's public posture almost perfectly, wary, skeptical, and intent on keeping diplomatic options alive, while acknowledging that the signals coming from Washington, Tehran, and the battlefield do not yet add up to a stable picture. Even so, Iran has clearly moved to reinforce coordination with Moscow. Iranian official channels and recent reporting show that Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araqi has remained active in crisis diplomacy and in discussions with foreign counterparts, including Russia and European officials. His outreach highlights the degree to which Tehran continues to rely on Moscow as a strategic counterweight at a time of intense military and political pressure. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov remains one of the central figures on Moscow's diplomatic front, and the Russian Foreign Ministry continues to present the Kremlin's approach as one focused on political resolution rather than further military expansion. Public coordination between Tehran and Moscow has therefore become part of a larger diplomatic contest, not just about ending current hostilities, but about shaping what post-crisis leverage, regional influence, and negotiation architecture may look like. In practical terms, what makes the moment especially dangerous is the overlap of several flashpoints. One is the Caspian Sea, where the conflict is threatening to expand into a zone with direct Russian sensitivity. Another is Bushehr, where any successful strike could create consequences far beyond the immediate military theater. A third is the Strait of Hormuz and the wider energy map, where disruptions can rapidly become global economic shocks. Overlay all of that with contested accounts of diplomacy, competing narratives from Washington and Tehran, and escalating military claims, and the result is a crisis in which misunderstanding itself becomes a strategic risk. That is why Russian officials have been so careful to avoid treating every battlefield claim as settled fact, even while responding forcefully to the implications. When asked about one report involving maritime action, the Kremlin declined to endorse details it could not independently confirm, but it did not soften its broader warning. Moscow's view is that the conflict has already risen to a level where any further spillover could produce consequences that no side is fully able to control. The rhetoric from Washington, meanwhile, has remained unusually blunt. In public remarks, Trump framed the military campaign in maximalist terms, arguing that Iran's military infrastructure had been devastated and insisting that Tehran would never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. He also argued that pressure had changed Iran's posture. Whether those claims reflect a coherent negotiating strategy, coercive signaling, or domestic political messaging is still being debated. What is clearer is that they have intensified the sense that events are moving simultaneously on military and diplomatic tracks that may or may not connect. Against that backdrop, Russia is trying to inject one central message into the crisis: some lines should not be crossed. The Kremlin's warnings about the Caspian Sea and nuclear infrastructure are not routine diplomatic flourishes. They are markers of what Moscow sees as escalation thresholds with consequences far larger than short-term battlefield gains. The significance of the Caspian issue lies partly in symbolism and partly in hard strategy. Symbolically, it would mean a conflict born in the Middle East had broken into a space historically treated as insulated from direct confrontation. Strategically, it would place military action in a basin shared by states whose security interests are tightly interlocked. That combination is exactly what makes Russian officials so uneasy. For now, the world is left with a picture that is at once fluid and deeply precarious. Israel says it has widened the battlefield. The United States says diplomacy may still be alive. Iran signals urgency in coordinating with allies while disputing parts of the American narrative. Russia warns that the crisis is approaching catastrophic levels and insists that attacks on nuclear infrastructure could bring irreparable consequences. International monitors continue to track Bushehr, and the IAEA says radiation levels remain normal. But in a conflict like this, the absence of disaster today is not the same thing as safety tomorrow. In the end, the emerging story is not only about warplanes, missile boats, or one round of competing official statements. It is about how rapidly a regional war can begin pressing against strategic boundaries that involve nuclear safety, global energy routes, and the interests of multiple major powers at once. Russia's latest intervention makes one thing unmistakable. Moscow believes the conflict is nearing a point where further expansion could become far more than a Middle Eastern crisis. It could become a wider international emergency.